So we have an update for you on Trump's trade war with the world, and we're starting with the UK today. Let's have a watch.
So we feel really good about the deal. You've heard the Prime Minister, he feels really good about the deal, right? And we started at 10% and we ended at 10%, and the market for America is better. And this is a perfect example of why Donald Trump produced Liberation Day. People don't understand he gets things done in a matter of time. This would have taken Jameson and I 3 years, maybe. And instead, we got it done in 45 days.
So according to Letnick, we started at 10% and we ended at 10%. Thank you to the leadership of Donald Trump. He really did say that. These are the headlines today. US and UK unveil framework for trade deal. So this is a little bit better than a concepts of a plan. At least we have a framework for a trade deal. And I want to go over the details because it's actually quite interesting. And especially want to hear from people in the UK. We have a lot of viewers there, so please share. One of the sticking points that a lot of channels won't talk about in the USA, because you won't know until after you leave the US, is actually countries such as the UK or I'm here in Korea will protest the food and standards of US beef and other products. From the US perspective, basically they want to sell their junk food to other countries. So listen to this a bit and you'll see what I'm saying here.
In Wisconsin and California, where all the dairy cattle are, where all the dairy cows are, and then the cattle, we got Texas, Nebraska, we got Kansas, good for that. We got all the corn states. Iowa's going to benefit from more access for our ethanol.
So that's Navarro talking about, right, various states that will benefit from selling old meat and lower quality meat to other countries. We also have Trump saying, hey, the deal I made today with UK is great for our farmers and ranchers. It's also wonderful for UK. Everybody benefits. That's the way it should be. But again, it depends on which point of view that you're on this one. And I just want to give you a different perspective. Someone from the UK, I think this was BBC, even asked President Trump regarding food quality. Have a listen.
Trade too. Yes,
Thank you.
behind you.
Tom Bateman at the BBC. Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned meat.
You're with who?
The BBC.
Oh, good. Very nice. They treat me beautifully.
You mentioned meat and beef exports. The UK currently doesn't accept American beef because of its own food standards.
So if you heard it, the BBC is saying currently the UK doesn't, accept American beef because, of food standards. Food standards vary by country. And so again, USA is trying to sell basically lower standard products to other places.
Are you calling on the UK to accept all American beef and chicken products?
Well, I think they'll take what they want. We have plenty of it. We have every type. We have every classification you can have. As you know, Bobby Kennedy is doing a tremendous job, and he's, I think, probably heading toward your system with no chemical, no this, no that. I mean, I think we're heading that way. It seems to be, and but we have that also. So we're a very big country. We have a lot of beef. We're a very big country, so it'll.
So it's kind of a dodge of a question there, and I bring this up because this is actually one of the sticking points, which actually are an important discussion. And it's basically food quality of life in the USA. So, I try to be honest with you guys with this stuff. I don't disagree with everything that Trump says, or I don't disagree with everything, say, he mentioned, RFK Jr. So some of the stuff that Kennedy's been after is, hey, let's try to clean up our food industry, make healthier food for Americans. I could totally agree. And I think that's something that we should talk about more openly. But I also acknowledge that there's people out there that is like, you know what? I'm all about profits over health. I disagree with that stuff, but I understand that perspective. And it depends on, if health's important to you or not. Say in the UK, this is kind of interesting. This is an older article, but I just want to say this has been a long-running issue. People inside the USA don't realize it that much, but yes, outside the USA, the food quality is higher. It says, why British people protesting US farm imports? And again, I want to hear from people in the UK on this one. I'll just tell you here in Korea, when you go to the meat aisle, it'll tell you sort of where the meat's from. So there's like a US section, there's an Australia section, and there's a Korea section. We get a lot of meat from, I should say beef from those places. We also get meat from China. We get meat from various places. Occasionally, you also see in the grocery store in New Zealand. It just depends, what deals you have set up. I'd be curious in the UK, like when you go to the grocery store, which countries do you guys typically get meat from? Back in 2008, but there's more than just this, but I'm just showing you some older stuff. There was a massive candlelight protests against U.S. beef industry. Basically, Koreans, they really care about food quality. It's important. Health is important to people here. And essentially is like, USA, why are you sending us bad stuff? And why some of you politicians are making deals with the USA to take that bad stuff. This has just been recently, as you can see here, March 12th, 2025. U.S. ranchers want Trump to remove Korea's age restriction on beef imports. So basically here in Korea, regular people are like, don't send us your old meat, USA. and USA is like, well, but other countries take our old meat. You should take it too. So again, everything depends on where you live and whether or not you think health is important to you. This is different ways of thinking about meat. And it's actually quite interesting. So USA, so we have different grades. So I don't want to give the implication that everything in the USA is unhealthy. It depends which quality that you want to buy, right? And so when you go to the grocery store, for those of you, you'll see these stickers on there, be it USDA Select, Choice, or Prime. In Australia, they have like 9 classifications. In Japan, they got like 12 different ones that you can see here, or BMS, I should say. And then they have A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. But it's going to depend on again, where you live. It's actually quite fascinating when you look at this stuff. So you can see in beef, you can talk about Prime, Choice, or Select, sort of how it looks, and other ways to think about this well. So this is Australia, various, how you talk about marbling and where you would rate it there. And, part of what's the negotiating with the trade and why it takes so long, we talked about in the last video, is there are multiple industries and product categories involved. Now, the Trump people try to tell you that, oh, yes, it's so easy. We're just going to treat, one country and every industry in that country the same, but it's actually quite complicated. From the U.S. perspective, they want to eliminate as much, red tape is what they call it, as possible. But, when I see stuff like this was the headlines today. Head of FEMA removed after saying the agency should not be abolished. Like, remember the way Trump and Musk always talk about the government is like those regulations of, those pesky regulations of food quality standards, or those pesky, agencies that want to help people with disaster. Just get rid of them. It'll make everything faster. And yes, things will go faster if you don't care about people's health or safety. But I do question that kind of stuff that the Trump and Musk do. So I do want to put that out there. Have a listen a little bit more of what Navarro has to say about the trade deal.
And he listens, Charles. That's the beauty of this president. He listens and then he helps. I mean, the whole adjustments we made, for example, to the auto parts with the interim break we gave them was in response to audio executives coming in and explaining how much time they needed. So he's talking to people every day, either in person or on the phone, listening to their needs. And Boeing, we're going to take good care of Boeing. I mean, that's our national champion in the aircraft industry. And you know who's been picking on them. But you know what? Boeing, as soon as China wouldn't buy their aircraft, India's buying them. Now Britain's going to buy them. And
so from these people's kind of perspective, right, is like, oh, the government's picking on Boeing, and those evil regulators care about people's safety. Who cares about safety? Let's just get these planes out the door as fast as possible. And that's kind of the, used car salesperson, shady, Trumpy kind of person's world, is just make those deals, put money in my pocket, and don't necessarily be concerned about quality. That's why I started with talking about food standards with you guys. It varies around the world, or in this situation, safety issues over at Boeing, which to me, I think that's a real serious concern. And I'll be curious, people in the UK, given the choice, say you're a Brit, would you rather buy an Airbus or would you rather buy Boeing? And I'm not anti-American. I'll make it really clear. I actually want American companies to do really, really well, but I want us to make good products and let our products speak for themselves, not necessarily, a bully government pushing, defective either food or defective planes to other places. So in my opinion, that's how you protect the American brand, by producing quality goods that people want, not necessarily just forcing people into whatever deals. So these are some of the things that were talked about. Or I should say, that'll be in the framework of the deal. That's how we're talking about it, because there's yet to be a finalized stuff because it takes time. Automotive tariffs. This is coming from The Guardian. They put a pretty good outline of this stuff. It says here, tariffs for UK cars imported to the US will be cut from 27.5 to 10%, up to a maximum of 100,000 cars a year. So be it, Jaguar, Land Rover, etc. And it's actually quite fascinating. Again, when you travel outside the USA, you'll find a bunch of different brands, etc. Because, just different markets have different needs or wants. Some people in say UK market would want to buy cars that maybe Americans don't want to buy, or maybe Americans want to buy cars that maybe people in the UK don't want to buy. It's gonna vary. So for those of you who are Jaguar fans, and this has always been my impression of Jaguar, they're cool looking cars, but not particularly reliable. And I'm not a huge fan of Land Rover, so I sounds like I'm hating on the UK brands here. But someone was mentioned as well is that Tata's tied to these, so there's that, which is actually quite interesting. And brands change around. Like for example, when I was a kid, Volvo was really popular among like just older people in Oregon. That's where I grew up. I remember seeing a lot of these old Volvos. They're like boxes, and they're like really metal tanks, basically. And I think China bought Volvo, and Volvo's it's not the same brand that it used to be. Like wife and I, we saw Volvo the other day, and the design was awful, to be perfectly frank. So, brands change. But that was always my impression of Jaguar. I'd like to hear you guys' impression if you've have a really positive impression of it. And I just want to hear. Steel and aluminum. U.S. tariffs of 25% on steel and aluminum have been reduced to 0 under the deal. This is relatively little in overall trade terms, comprised about $700 million a year. They also got agriculture, which we talked about with the food situation. This is, and I'll just read a little bit what the Guardian has to say. The most potentially tricky area of the deal, not least due to concerns among UK voters and farmers about chlorinated chicken and hormone-fed beef. So again, I want to hear from people in the UK. So when I read this stuff, I can see what the news says, but it's different when you hear from people in the community. I can just tell you here in Korea, people are very concerned about food quality and safety. In fact, on holidays, we give people food, high quality food, be it fruits or meat, etc. And it can get quite pricey, but just we care about food. It depends on in USA. It's different. It's a frustrating topic in USA because in my opinion, I feel like we should invest a lot more in food quality, and we'd have a much better system. There was a documentary. I remember which one was it. It was the McDonald's one. I think it was the Super Size Me one, the part one. I think there's two versions of that one, but there's a sequel. But the first one, the guy, or it might have been Michael Moore's movie, which was about the gun stuff. But I remember seeing something that was quite fascinating. They were talking about in cafeterias in USA where they're showing kids eat pizza and they eat French fries and burgers and basically junk food in cafeterias. And the argument was well, if we put healthy food in schools in USA, kids won't eat it. They just throw it away, and that's a waste. So just give them pizza. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me in that was when you change the diet of what kids eat, it affects, whether or not kids can sit still, whether or not kids fight in school. And one of the saddest things, and I'll just say I saw it a lot when I was in Philadelphia when I went to school there. There'll be some moms in USA, and I haven't seen this in other countries. I've just only seen it in USA, where moms will put Coca-Cola in babies' baby bottles. And actually, you know what? I saw it in North Carolina also. It is a very frustrating and awful thing to see, to be perfectly frank. And it's a shame because you're setting up your kid to have a sugar addiction for the rest of their life, and just it's just unhealthy. So there's that. I'm a big stickler on food quality. I just think it's one of the most important things that we don't talk about enough. And all those hormones and stuff like that. Because sometimes people ask me, because if you don't know, I'm 50, and people ask me what's the secret to good health and or how you stay young. Guys, just stay away from American hormone infested food. It matters. It matters what you put into your body, a great deal. And in USA you can get good food, but it just costs a lot more. But be proactive on your health. Don't be reactive. Put good stuff in it when you can, and you'll live a much longer life. And I don't think I'm saying anything crazy. But unfortunately, in USA, it's just it's a frustrating system, and it's not only just make healthy options available. You got to make it affordable for everyone, and that's again you invest in your people. So this is other stuff we can talk about in USA. I know we talk about food a lot in this on this particular video, but it's an important issue. Other areas, a White House guide to deal with was it Downing Street? So we got streamlined customs. We can talk about preferential access to UK aerospace components for the US manufacturers, and increased help for US firms with UK procurement. You also have stuff with pharmaceuticals, and now for areas where there was no news. So I guess they're still gonna have to work out that. You also have this. Let's listen a little bit.
I'm with the London Times. I would say this is a great day for James Bond because now Aston Martins will be available to American buyers. But it'll be even better by extending it to film. You've talked about a big tariff on films, and we'd like to know if there'd be relief on.
If you remember, Trump announced like 100% tariff on foreign-produced films, which is pretty insane. And the film industry is important to people in the UK. So listen to what Trump has to say about that.
Going to have a discussion on that separately, and as you know, we're putting tariffs on that particular film. You said the movie makers, and we're going to be doing some tariffs to get them because a lot of them have left this country. They all live here. The money comes from here. Everything comes from here, but they make them in other countries. So we're going to do something to bring them back, maybe to a large extent, but. James Bond has nothing to worry about that, I can tell you. James Bond. And Sean Connery was a friend of mine. Sean Connery was responsible for my getting zoning in Aberdeen. He said, let the bloody bloke build his golf courses. And, I was like 4 years into the process, and it was impossible in Aberdeen. And he just stood up one day and he said that. As soon as he said that, I got the approvals in about 2 minutes.
So you have to understand, and Trump reveals himself all the time when he gives these things, is like he's just in it for making deals with himself. The same way with before they're talking about automakers came to the White House and made a deal, and then the Trump changed his mind, or trying to give special benefits to Boeing. It's all about making deals for himself, and that's when he gets really excited. So we'll see what happens with the film industry. Because that still need to negotiate between the US and UK. You also got digital service taxes or online safety. Any number of things that you could talk about with that stuff. Now, the EU tends to be a lot stricter than USA, and I think the UK is also stricter than USA on this kind of stuff. But these are some of the things that we're talking about. Let's have a listen to some more.
Because business has slowed down, as you mentioned,
in China.
But we're seeing as a result, the ports here in the U.S., the traffic has really slowed, and now thousands of dock workers and truck drivers are worried about their jobs.
Yeah, no, that means we lose less money. When I see that means we lose less money.
Basically, the question was, with the slowdown, people in USA are worried about losing their jobs, be it dock workers, truck drivers, etc. And you literally just see Trump's response. He doesn't really care. Okay, fine. If this is a few little people have to lose jobs, but I'm going to make my money. And it's just, it's frustrating to watch this stuff. But I do want you to see what is going on, and you can see his priorities.
I'm with the Daily Telegraph now. You know me from another
I do.
How concerned are you about the UK's reliance on China? Chinese money in the money market, Chinese exports.
We're not concerned.
Is that something that came up in
honestly,
discussions?
I'm not concerned about anything.
He's not concerned about anything. All right. So, and then Letnick goes out on TV and tells people how awesome everyone is and how awesome the deals are. He's basically a used car salesman, but let's take a watch.
Depth, the rigor, and the intensity. So many products, so many details. This is not sort of a soft deal. This is a detailed, analytical model between two countries, really getting it right for us both. So when you start doing bigger and bigger economies, remember, Britain is the 6th largest in the world. As you get to these bigger and bigger economies, there's just a huge amount of work, a huge amount. And, you talk about India, Japan, Korea. I mean, these are just huge. In the European Union, wow.
So he's an idiot, but I'll just give it to Letnick. He is entertaining. But basically, you're watching a used car salesperson, pitch this kind of stuff. That's why I wanted to show you his words. And then you got this. The math isn't working up on Trump's economy. So he's actually proposing, and this is actually an interesting one. So I would agree with Trump on this stuff. I don't disagree necessarily. Trump seeks tax hike on wealthy earning $2.5 million or more. So we'll see if that ends up being a thing. I think personally they should really work on, wealth tax stuff. Because the way, say, like Elon Musk's tax is very, very different. because he can shelter his money basically. So someone like Elon Musk will take no income. So then Musk wouldn't necessarily be affected by this. But then what Musk will do is say take no income from Tesla, but get a bunch of stock and stock options, and then borrow, basically lines of credit, borrow money based on those, and dodge tax in that way, or various ways that you can shelter your money through your phony philanthropy groups, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you could go after. The other thing you could do as well to make our numbers make sense is not fire people in the IRS, which is what the Trump and Musk want to do, but actually hire people to make sure that companies and wealthy individuals aren't using shady accountants to get around taxes and go through loopholes. So like I said, this one, if you figure out a way to make a more fair system, go for it. But we'll see. I think this will be a tough getting through Congress, and since it's Republican controlled. So anyway, that's what's going on with the trade deal. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts, especially from people in the UK. What's going on and how's it reported over there? Is it positive, negative? And what do you think about Starmer? Is he now a Trump lackey? That's my thoughts. I want to hear yours. And thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.